Competitive Call of Duty has taken over my life for over a decade, and today I'm going to be going through the evolution of competitive Call of Duty ever since the very first edition that I started watching back in Modern Warfare 3. Let's get right into it. Modern Warfare 3, wow, what a time. If you guys were around the original MW3, you guys would know that this is one of the best competitive Call of Duties of all time. Watching Stumpy play, this is when I first actually fell in love with the game and competitive Call of Duty. You had the AR, you had the ACR 6.8. Wow. Probably the best, if not one of the best ARs to ever grace competitive Call of Duty. It is... oh my god, what a weapon. If you guys got to play back then as well, the kind of dopamine you got from that weapon just using it was incredible. The maps, oh my god, we had Arcadian, we had Dome, we had Hard Hat, Bootleg. I mean, the list goes on and on. We had Lockdown, we had Resistance, we had Underground. I don't know if Underground was a map. Seatown, you had Capture the Flag, you had Search and Destroy, and it was just such a simple game. The SMGs, the MP7, wow. What a game for competitive Call of Duty. This game was like, it was so simple, yet so enjoyable. Like, forget pubs, this is just for competitive Call of Duty, but this was like, there wasn't a lot of NA teams, and obviously the structure wasn't as kind of how it was now, but it was so simple. Like, you watch Upto go to an event and they would literally play on like kitchen chairs and office chairs in like a venue with like 50 people, and it was quite humbling to look back at now, but you know, it was just the start. It was the birth of competitive Call of Duty for me, and it was just so good. I absolutely love that game, and if you guys played it, I'm sure you guys loved it too. I would love to go back and kind of play that game because it was such a good game. Then we go over to Black Ops 2, and this is where I would say competitive Call of Duty really just started to blow up, and it was like Modern Warfare 3 kind of walked so Black Ops 2 could run. But in Black Ops 2, we have the M8A1. What a weapon. We had the FAL, we had the AN94. We had so much variety, and this is where competitive Call of Duty just kind of really blossomed. You had the MSMC, still my favorite SMG ever. You had the PDW, you had the MP7, you had the Scorpion. We had a range of weapons. Not only did we have that, we had some of the best maps we've ever had in the history of Call of Duty. We had Hijacked, Express. What else did we have? We had Slums, we had Standoff, we had Raid, we had Yemen. We had so many good maps, and this was the birth of arguably the best game mode to ever grace the game of Call of Duty competitive. It is Hardpoint. That's right, Hardpoint was made in Black Ops 2. It was just a game mode. They threw it in and it was unbelievable. Now rank play, oh my god, don't get me started on rank play. The rank play system, this game was everything. I actually remember injuring my leg in school during like a day before. Oh, that was a bad voice break. I remember a day before Black Ops 2 came out, I actually injured my leg and I took a week off school because I couldn't walk. And I remember all my friends like saying, oh, you know, the teacher thinks you're bunking school for COD. I was like, I'm actually not, but like, I would have. I was like, I remember stressing, but it was just a funny memory. And this game, man, so good, man. The moments on competitive Call of Duty, I mean, there was a lot of cheese on there as well. If you guys remember the Cap 40, I think it was called, the pistol, and you had the sentry gun, you had the Remington shotgun. There was a lot of cheese, but the moments in this game was unbelievable. It was a birth of complexity as well, and Rico Impact, and you guys remember Karma, Parasite, Crim6, Ache, Scumpy, like there was so many people that were kind of like really starting to blow up during this time, and the competitive Call of Duty was just like really starting to get proper. People were making a real career of it, and this was honestly the birth of competitive Call of Duty to the public figure. Modern Warfare 3 is a little bit more unknown, but this was like where everyone started to understand, okay, this is what competitive Call of Duty is and what it really could be about. Then we move over to Call of Duty Ghosts. I think with Ghosts, it had a lot to it. There was a lot of good things, a lot of bad things. It was just a lot of change, and I think especially after having such a successful year in Black Ops 2, it was a little bit like bad timing, I would say, for Ghost. Like, we look at the actual weapons. The Remington was super fun. It actually was a really good weapon, as well as the SMG with the MTAR. The MTAR was so fun as well, and the Vector as well. So the actual weapons were pretty fun. You go through some of the maps. Freight was actually a very fun map. You had Octane, you had Sovereign. I didn't mind Sovereign as well. What else was there? Strike Zone was calm. Warhawk was good. So the maps were okay as well. Like, looking at it now from the games you've had recently, you look at that and say, you know what, it wasn't too bad. But one of the biggest mistakes they did is getting rid of Hardpoint. We had domination in that game, we had blitz in that game. It was a bit too much change, you know, but they were creative with it. I think if we had Hardpoint in that game instead of domination, and maybe normal CTF instead of blitz, I really think history would have been kinder to Ghost. I really do. I think Ghost, they did a lot right, but they also, like I said, did a lot wrong. Like getting Hardpoint introduced in Black Ops 2 and then taking it away was arguably the dumbest thing they could have done, and I think it really kind of messed up the game stock. But Search and Destroy in that game, wow, the creativity. You had the Remington, you could have like thermals on it which could switch, you had smoke grenades, you had different classes. It was kind of like a pick 10 system as well, so you could choose between different kind of pros and cons, and that game for Search and Destroy is absolutely iconic. That's why I do believe if they had Hardpoint in that game as well, history would be very, very kind to Ghost, because everyone remembers that game as such a good Search and Destroy game. But like I'm mentioning now, if they just had a little bit more kind of flair in the respawn, this game could arguably be up there with the very best, but unfortunately it wasn't for them. Then we move over to Advanced Warfare, and this game was so fun. The addition to jetpacks in Call of Duty, and once again, one of the best highlights of my gaming career was playing this game competitively. Super fun. You had Biolab, what a map. You had Comeback, you had Detroit, you had Horizon. I don't know if Horizon's a map actually, I'm just looking at the list here. You had Wells, you had Solar, you had Terrace, you had Riot, you had Retreat, you had Recovery at times as well. There was a lot of maps there, to be fair. There was a lot of maps in competitive Call of Duty. In terms of the weapons, the ASM-1, what a submachine gun, and one of the best ARs of all time for sure was the BAU 27. Super weapon, and that game as well, it had a lot of potential, and I think it did a good job. You know, obviously Hardpoint was back with the addition of Uplink. This was also jetpacks the first ever time, so it was a big change to the Call of Duty kind of infrastructure. Some people liked it. I think for the casuals they didn't like it as much, but if you listen to, for example, Zuma stream, I always hear him say this is one of the best competitive CODs of all time for him, and I think a lot of people would agree, man. The skill gap was at an all-time high, and in terms of competitive Call of Duty, I think Advanced Warfare, if anyone that did play in that era, I do think they enjoyed it. Rank play was good. They had a lot of kind of cosmetics as well in that game. You could have the supply drops. It was definitely a hit. It was definitely a hit for me, and the more we look back at it, the more history kind of treats it kind as well, because people remember this game and they're all kind of thinking of it in a very positive way. But even Uplink itself, man, was a bit of a risk at the time, but it turned out to be successful. So hey, it was a great Call of Duty. And now we go over from one banger to another banger. We're taking over into the Black Ops 3 era, and let me tell you, when I'm saying Black Ops 3 could be people's favorite Call of Duty, besides a few things, and we're going to address them now. Starting off with the weapons. In terms of range, wow. With the ICR as an option, you had the Man of War, you had the Shiva, you had the M8A7, and this is just for the ARs. You had so many options there. Then the submachine guns, you guys could go with the Kuda, the VMP, you had the Vespa, you had the Pharaoh, we had the Razorback. In terms of SMGs, there was so many SMGs available as well, but the VMP and the M8 were the main weapons, and they were so fun to use. It was unbelievable. Now, this is where we had the ban and protect system. I think the intentions were good. I just think that they could have made it a little bit better, and they could have made it so it wasn't a race. I think a lot of people agree when you listen to the pros talk about it. They could have made it so it wasn't exactly a race back to that. It was more so you basically have your picks, and you kind of have one pick each, right? I guess that could have made it a bit better, and for rank play it was a little bit tedious having to do this every single map. I think they could have just made the structure a little bit better, but to be honest with you, in my opinion, I like the system overall. I think if you look at it compared to now, it would just make the game so much better. I really do think it would. I think it makes the game so much better without this current system we have now, where it's like, the problem with it now, right, is we have no creativity, you know. But if you look back then, there was so much creativity. And I do think that the ban and protect system did allow that, you know, because like I mentioned with the SMGs, you could have a Kuda some series, a VMP some series, people get the Vespa out, even the snipers. I don't have the list of snipers there, but the sniping was so fun in that game as well. And with the ARs, I see Formal using the HVK or the Shiva or the M8 or the Man of War. Like, there was just so much range there. The score streaks were phenomenal as well and competitive. Let's talk about the maps. We haven't gone through the maps. You had Breach, you had Evac, you had Fringe, you had, what else is there? Let's see. Infection. I should show you guys the maps actually, but I'm not able to get on the same screen. But anyways, actually you'll see in the background. Sorry, I'm tweaking. But yeah, you had some of the best maps as well in that game, so it definitely had a good range. Hardpoint phenomenal in that game. Search and Destroy great in that game, and once again Uplink as well. So this game definitely can't get spoken about enough in terms of being one of the best Call of Duties of all time in terms of competitive. Just a really good game. Then we go over to Infinite Warfare, and I think Infinite Warfare, they kind of messed up a little bit here again after having such bangers in a row. You know, they're gonna always compare it to those games, and I think Infinite Warfare for me was just, you know, a bit of a miss. Map wise, again, not terrible. You had Crusher, you had Breakout, you had a few other maps. Let's find them right here. You had Scorch, you had Throwback. I'm trying to find the other maps. I can't really see a lot more maps oh yeah, precinct, you had retaliation. The game itself was okay. I just think out of the jetpack era, it was one of the worst ones out of the jetpack era. It was weird because they went for like a futuristic alien vibe, but there was a few things they kind of missed in that game. But in terms of weapons, or the ERAD was alright. It wasn't like the best SMG we've had, but it was okay. I wasn't a big fan of it as the main SMG. In terms of the ARs as well, we had the MV4, the K-Bar. I think the ARs were more fun to use than the ERAD. The ERAD was one of the probably my least favorite SMGs out of the time, I would say, out of all these kind of nostalgic CODs. But Infinite Warfare, I would say, especially in that time when we just had Advanced Warfare and Black Ops 3, you know, I would definitely say it was a bit of a miss, because if you look at it, where it was in history, it was just compared to such good Call of Duties that I just think if it was around now, it maybe would get a few more positives because of the lack of quality we've had recently. But back then the standards was so high, I just don't think they were up to expectations. And you know, I think it was just an okay COD. It wasn't great, it was just okay. Then we move over to World War II. Once again, we're going a completely different direction now. This is where the jetpack era has come to an end, and we're going more boots to the ground. But this is not just boots to the ground, this is an absolutely slow version of the game. This is a traditional version, and to the public eye didn't seem to be the best game, and I understand why. But in terms of pure competitive, I actually think this game was heavily slept on. For the ARs, we started off with the STG-44. We had a couple of ARs there that were really fun to use. I can't remember the other AR. I think it was like an LMG we used, but it was like I forgot what it was called. It's not on this list here, but it was like a really like annoying weapon. It was super broken. But then the SMG is the PPSH. What a weapon. I really did like this game. I think there was a few things going on at the time. One, we just went from jetpack era to a really slow Call of Duty. So it was kind of like really big jump from extreme to extreme. We had 3 jetpack games in a row to boom, boots to the ground, slow movement, dull game. You know what I'm saying? So I think they could have made it a bit more vibrant in terms of the game itself. And this is where Fortnite was starting to pop off. And I remember the comparison. You had one really vibrant cartoon game that the world was taking over, and then you had one very dull looking game at Call of Duty. So I do think the game itself, like the mechanics and the actual competitive, was really fun. I just think they could have made a better job in terms of the colors, and instead of it being a World War theme, I think if we just change it a little bit, this game could have had a bit more love. However, I did like this Call of Duty. I really did. The game itself was very fun. They changed the whole perk system. The game was fun. The game was fun overall. Even the maps, man. We had Arden's Forest, we had Flag Tower, Gibraltar, London Docks, St. Marie. We had a couple of good maps there. We really did. USS Texas. These are all the maps in there. But if you guys remember, London Docks, St. Marie, Arden's Forest, they were good maps in my opinion. I actually liked the maps. Again, it was a good Call of Duty. It just wasn't up there with the very best, but I think it was a good Call of Duty overall. I actually didn't mind it personally, but I know the main opinion was people weren't a big fan of that, and I understand that too. Then we move over to Black Ops 4, and this is once again an absolute W in the Call of Duty franchise. And this is where we realized that Black Ops was just an elite series, and Black Ops 4, it felt like, you know, when you have a plan, you have a plan and you're like, you know what, we're going to do this. It felt like Black Ops 4 didn't just have a plan, they hit this out of the park. ARs, we had the ICR-7 with the Maddox. Wow. Unbelievable. The Maddox, maybe the best gun ever in terms of overall strength of a weapon. It could do everything. The ICR was the main AR. The Maddox was a flex gun. This is the first time in a while we've actually had a flex weapon. 5v5. This game took a big risk once again. We went to 5v5 and it absolutely paid dividends because this game was unbelievable. We had the addition of Control, just like in Black Ops 2, a new game mode, but this one's actually successful as well because Control in Black Ops 4 was so fun. We had Specialists. I forgot about Specialists in Black Ops 3. That's my bad. I should have mentioned Specialists. I completely forgot about that. But Black Ops 4 had Specialists again. We had score streaks. It was so creative, so much fun. The SMGs, we had the SORG 9mm. I actually personally like the SORG. We also had the Spitfire as well. It was just a really fun game. Lots of vibrance, lots of colors. In terms of the maps, we had Arsenal, we had Firing Range, we had Gridlock, we had Frequency, we had Hacienda, we had some throwback maps, we had Jungle in there, we had so many good maps. We had Seaside, we had Summit, we had Slums come back, we had Payload. What a game for competitive Call of Duty. 5v5, Specialists, insane weapons, insane colors, just overall a really good game. And yeah, that one was definitely missed. And this was actually the CW as well. Like, it was just kind of like the peak of competitive Call of Duty, where, you know, 5v5, once again, the rosters were incredible. Just everything about 5v5, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun in Black Ops 4. And then we go over, and the world of competitive Call of Duty would be changed forever. The landscape would never be the same. For 2 reasons. One was COVID. Of course, the world had never been the same since COVID. But not only that, we had the addition of the CDL. Call of Duty League, where teams are now franchised, salaries are inflated, and the world is in a complete scenario of uncertainty. And what we have here is MW19, arguably one of the worst games ever for competitive Call of Duty. Again, majority of the season was online. The game itself just didn't really hit with a competitive fan base. However, this was the addition of Warzone. So for the casuals, this is arguably the best Call of Duty of all time because Warzone was kind of added in. And I think without Warzone, this Call of Duty was an absolute failure. But let's focus on competitive here. With the M4A1, I was never a fan of the M4A1 because it didn't feel like an AR. It felt like a Superman weapon. It kind of felt like the Maddox from Black Ops 4, but you still need a main AR in my opinion. So this didn't feel like a main AR to me. And then we go over across to the SMG or the MP5, which, you know, we've had in the past, but this game didn't really hit for me. The maps were very average. We had Arklov Peak, awful. We had Gun Runner, okay. We had Hackney Yard. We had, you know, Piccadilly. We had some okay stuff there. I personally really like gunfight in this game more than competitive COD. I used to play gunfight, play Warzone. That was about it. I just wasn't a fan of competitive COD, and I think the game itself just wasn't great. It was still 5v5. It just didn't feel good in any area. The pacing fell off. Again, it was a big miss for me. It's probably I would say this is maybe on the list so far, the worst experience I've had in competitive COD. The rank play system wasn't even a real rank play system. It was just awful. It really was awful. And it was just an online year as well. So I think people love Warzone, but in terms of this game, I think it's probably the lowest on the rating so far. But then we move over and we have a little bit of grace here. We get Cold War. Cold War. This was basically the closest we ever got to a Black Ops 2 kind of remaster scenario. It was okay. Again, I think that COVID was kind of, you know, bad for this game because the first few events were online. I think if this game had a LAN at the start, I actually think it would actually be treated a lot differently. And again, this game was good. I just feel like they could have made a few more changes to it. Maybe, again, a big problem with this game as well was like SPMM was at an all-time high. This is when they started getting it in, so pubs wasn't very good with it. And the movement was completely different to Warzone. So it felt like competitive Call of Duty, this game was on its own little island. You know, so it did feel a little bit different, but the actual game itself was really fun. It was really fun. We had an FFAR meta at a point, we had the XM4 meta, we had the QBZ meta, we had the Krig meta. This is all kind of rank play to my memory. Even with the submachine guns, you could use the AK-74U, which was the main sub. Also the MAC-10 was in it at times as well. So this game was really fun in my opinion for overall. It just had a few flat areas, but this was a really good game. This was kind of the closest we got to like traditional Call of Duty in a while, especially after a few kind of iffy years, like I mentioned with MW 2019. You know, we had like World War II 2 years before that. This was kind of like a good balance. And the maps were pretty good. It started off pretty rough. We had, you know, a few okay maps, like Miami was pretty awful, but overall the map set started to get a little bit saved, especially with maps getting, you know, brought back as well. So the original maps we had in this game that were okay, we had Checkmate, which is all right. We had Garrison, which I thought was okay too. Moscow was pretty good. Miami was pretty arse. That was it. That was the only real maps we really had. So it didn't really feel like it was competitive ready, and that was a big problem. So a few of the maps did save it. You know, Raid came back, Express came back, which again was really, really good. Then we go across, we had Apocalypse that came in. We had a few more. I think that was it actually in terms of competitive. Standoff came in as well near the end of the year. Hijack came in near the end of the year. So there's a few maps that did come in. Again, we got Slums literally at season 5, which was a bit of a piss take, to be honest with you. If that came in at the start, it could have been nice, but we had a few maps that came in quite late to the year, and that did make the game feel better. But again, I think the map set was a little bit flat, and overall really good year for competitive Call of Duty. Just the map itself, the map set was a little bit flat, and as the year got on, it did get better and better. And then we move over towards Call of Duty Vanguard. Personally, I think this Call of Duty got a bit too much hate, and again, this is where the era of map sets in Call of Duty was definitely a big thing. I think the map sets from, I would say, MW19 onwards, the CDO era, just were never there. They were never at an all-time high, but this map had a few good maps. If they had a few more good maps, I actually think Vanguard would have been such a good Call of Duty. I really do believe that. I will die on that hill. It was one of my favorite Call of Duties playing in years, and I think if they had a good map set, it would have been great. In terms of the weapons, we started off with the STG-44 and the automation as the ARs, and the automation was one of the best ARs I've used in. It was so fun. It was so much fun. And in terms of the SMGs, the MP40, wow, what a weapon. So fun, so mobile. It was just such an unbelievable experience. I actually love Vanguard, I really did. In terms of the maps, we had Berlin and Bocage. I was a big fan of it, I really was. We had Desert Siege, absolute arse, and there wasn't a lot more. We have Tuscan as well, so that's why I think the game failed in my opinion, because the map set just wasn't good. We had to play with Desert Siege Search, terrible map. We had to play with Gavutu, awful map. We had to play a Castle at the start. I actually didn't mind Castle Search and Destroy at times, but again, the map set just really wasn't there, and there was no no additions that saved them, and that was the big problem for me. We also had to kind of like make do with control. I remember having control on like Tuscan, Gavutu, and then Berlin. We had to really make do with the maps. I think, hot take, if this game had 3 more good maps, I think this COD would have been amazing. I really do, because I remember watching this COD and the only problem I had was the maps were just so repetitive, so boring, and they just ruined the game. I think if the game had good maps, the actual gunplay was so much fun. This game was a lot of fun, the maps just let it down. Then we move over to Modern Warfare 2, and this was one of the decisions that I think Call of Duty should regret for a long time, because this is for the first time in years we had almost an S tier map set, but everything else of the game was awful. They were awful, it really was. But the maps, we had Fortress, Banger Map, we had Hotel, we had Embassy, we had Mikado. The map set was unbelievable. We even had a few okay maps. We had, you know, Hydroelectric, we had El Asilo. These were okay maps, but we had like 4 or 5 bangers there, we really did. But the game got rid of the red dots, there was movement, there was no dead silence. The game felt flat. They really fell on their head here. In terms of the weapons we were using, the Vel 46 was super fun in rank play, but the main SMG was the Vaznev. Vaznev was pretty good. I did enjoy the Vaznev, but again, the gunplay itself, the gunfights just didn't feel satisfying on this game because of all the other problems. And then for the AR, we did have the TAC 56. For the first time ever, we had a SCAR as the main AR, and again, I think the game got let down by the lack of movement and just a lack of basic stuff like red dots and overall stuff like that. So if this game had a bit more movement and added a little bit more to it, I think it really could have played better. But again, unfortunately, they messed it up for themselves. They really did, and that's going to be the end of that one. And then we move over to Modern Warfare 3, and Modern Warfare 3 I think started off okay. People were a little bit scared of how it's going to kind of transfer over, but I think it did a good job. And what happened with Modern Warfare 3 was it got better as the game progressed. It really did. So starting off with the weapons, I think the weapons were absolute S tier. We had the Rival 9 and the MCW. Wow, absolute bangers here. They really they smashed it with the weapons. I mean, the MCW and the Rival just felt incredible. They both felt incredible. They both had their place, and they just felt unbelievable. In terms of the map sets, we had the original MW2 maps, and this was great for nostalgia, great for bringing in that core audience, but they needed to hit hard. And where I think they went wrong is they kept that map set as the original maps. They should have released that map with more maps. Another thing I think they went wrong with is they brought back Mikado in November. In season 1 they brought back Hotel, but they never added these maps into the competitive map pool. I think if they added Hotel and Mikado into the map pool, we are sitting there with some amazing maps. I really do believe that. But again, the game got better as the year went on because we got the addition of Rio in season 1. Wow, Rio, one of the best made maps we've had in years. So unbelievable map. In season 2 they come on in and they add in Vista, so we're like, damn, that's another good map. In season 3 we had 6-star, so we're like, damn, that's another good map. So in 3 seasons we just had absolute bangers of maps. They did a great job keeping the content fresh, the weapons felt good, and overall they did a really good job in that game. Again, the hackers and stuff like that were still in the game, but in terms of overall CDL and stuff like that, this game was really well made in my opinion. Still a few problems, still not like the very best of the best, but I think they did a good job overall in MW3, especially looking back here after Black Ops 6. I think MW3 was a solid year. It's just a shame we had to have like Invasion throughout the year. We had to have like Terminal Hardpoint and Terminal Search and Destroy. So I do think the map set once again kind of saved it as the year went on, but when the year's at its peak at the start, when the interest at all-time high, we unfortunately had a poor map set, and it kind of like transferred over because all the fans that watched the game throughout the year, they basically were going to watch it anyways, right? But all the people that watched it at the start, that were only interested for the start, they lost interest because of the map set. So it's a bit of a shame, but overall I did like that Call of Duty. I think it was a very good job. Then we move over to Black Ops 6, the game we just had. I think Black Ops 6 was at the very start of the year super exciting. We had Omni movement, which was great addition, and I was very excited for Black Ops 6, but I think the problem with Black Ops 6 is if you look at it on a graph, I think throughout the year there wasn't much change. We can actually look at the maps here, right? So these are the maps that we started on Black Ops 6. So the maps that we used for competitive, we had Protocol, we had Red Card, we had Rewind, we had Skyline, we had Vault, we had that's it. So those are the maps we have for competitive, right? As we go across right now, we're like, they're not great maps. There's a few okay maps there, and then season 1 we come on in and we get Hacienda, okay? Season 2 we get bounty and dealership, only dealership stays. Season 3, we get firing range doesn't make it in, so there's no map set that gets added in. Season 4, we get fringe at the very end of the year, and season 5 we get nothing. So no maps made it into the rotation basically. We even took rewind out and brought it back in, and the only map that got added in was Hacienda, which was made from Black Ops 4. So I think the problem with this game was, as the year went on, there was no change. And also I think the pros have a big part to blame in this, because the game itself was so watered down in terms of GAs and stuff, that this felt one of the most flat experiences I've had in years, to be honest. With the Jackal as a stub, with the Ames as AR, and that's it. And, you know, you listen to what I was saying earlier about Black Ops 3, you know, we had the Shiva, we had the Man of War, we had the M8, we had the HPK, we had the sub, we had the Kuda, we had the VMP, we had the Vector. There was so much variety, you know, with the ban and protect system. The maps were S-tier. When you look at Black Ops 6, it was just Jackal, Ames, same 6 maps. So it just felt like no matter how much fun you had on that game, it was similar. It was just a similar experience every single map, and that was a big problem for me. And I think that was the downfall of Black Ops 6, is just the fact that there was just no variety. There really wasn't. The maps just, again, it just felt the same. The map set was very flat, and I just think they kind of fumbled the bag there. But that is going to be it. That is the evolution and the history of competitive Call of Duty. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, drop a like. This takes a lot of effort, a lot of work, and I'm trying to do a video every single day. So all I want you guys to do is one thing for me. If you guys enjoy the content, I would absolutely love if you guys could drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you guys for another video tomorrow. Peace.